All right, good morning, everybody. I hope that you are all doing well. It has been a while since we did our class because of the exams and all that, and spending time to mark your 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 exams and also your cuts. And therefore, it has been a while, but I believe that you have been fine all through, and that you have spent your time to do anything worthwhile that you think is worthwhile to you. Uh, Welcome back. This session is being recorded, so you're going to be able to find it after the class. So we're going to have our class for less than 1 hour because I've scheduled it up to 10:45 because thereafter I have another class at 11. So a 15-minute break will be good for me to prepare. So we get started. We stopped previously. We were doing categories of intelligent agents, and we described what is an intelligent agent. We described the PEAS representation, the PEAS representation of an intelligent agent, and today we want to discuss the the categories of intelligent agents, which are the agents. How can we classify or subdivide intelligent agents? So let me share my screen so that we can go through the content together. All right, there we go. Let me. I don't know if you all can see it. Let me maximize it a little bit. Okay, there we go. All right. So categories of intelligent agents or types of intelligent agents, same thing. We can divide intelligent agents to 5 subdivisions or 5 categories based on their performance and also their behavior. Based on their performance and their behavior. So we can categorize into simple reflex agent, model-based reflex agent, goal-based agents, utility-based agent, and learning agents. So we begin with simple reflex agents. So these are the 5. So we begin with 1, simple reflex agents. Now, simple reflex agents are basically the simplest kind of agents. Why are we saying they are the simplest? Because they only act on the current percepts from their environment. They do not. They also have limited intelligence, as we can see here, and they only work on the current percepts. The current percept, meaning that they can only act based on what they receive as input or a percept now. So they cannot act on other percepts. They cannot act on other percepts. And that's why we are saying they ignore the rest of the percept history. When we were starting with the artificial intelligence, we discussed percept history. We said percept history is a sequence of all the inputs that an agent has received over a period of time, and it enables it to maximize its performance measure. But simple reflex agents do not act on their percept history. They only work on the current percept. They ignore the percept history. And a simple example is the interrogation app like Eliza, the one that we were talking about, or a chatbot. Uh, let's talk about an interrogation app. When you talk to it and it's supposed to respond to you, it does not respond to you based on what it has learned about you. It responds to you based on what it hears you say now. So if I ask Eliza app, what is your name? It will ask me what is her name. Something like that. And I explain to it a name. I ask it, do you want to play a game? No, I don't know games. Something like that. So it only works on the percept that it receives currently, and it ignores all the percepts in its percept history, and that's why it's called a simple reflex agent. Reflex is, for instance, you as a person, if you feel hungry now, you're going to take food. All right. If you feel hungry, if you see somebody buying, selling ice cream, and you have money to spare, you're going to buy ice cream. So that's a reflex action. It is, it is, it is an action that has been influenced by something you have seen, heard, tasted, or some of those things from your senses. Something that is now. It is a reflex action. All right. Or if a fly or an insect flies across your face, by reflex you are going to wipe it away from your face. That is a reflex action. It is not based on what you know about insects or what. It is just based on a current action that an insect has passed your face, and therefore you wipe it away. Just a reflex. It's a reflex action. If you feel like itching, your face is itching, by reflex you're going to just scratch your face, right? So that is those are reflex actions, and they are simple reflex actions. So a simple reflex agent is that which acts on the current percept, ignoring its percept history. We are also saying that simple reflex agents have very limited intelligence, all right, because they do not work on a percept history. So that means that they do not maximize their performance measure. Now another example is a room cleaner agent, like a robot that is supposed to clean a dirty surface, a dirty floor surface. Now, a room cleaner agent will be a simple reflex agent because, why? Because it only works if there is dirt in the room. So it will always be checking if there is dirt in the room. And if there is dirt in the room, then that is when it is going to clean. So it cannot clean unless there is dirt in the room. So dirt in the room is a percept. The presence of dirt in the room is a percept. So it can only clean when there is dirt in the room. Okay. So simple reflex agents, you can think about anything, but as long as that agent works on the current percept, it receives an input now and works on it now. All right. Or let's just talk about a robot which is supposed to help a, a child to understand math better. So it's just a simple robot. Now that robot is going to be doing this. Uh, the child is going to give the robot a number, and then it's going to calculate that number for you, for the child, right? So the child gives it 10 plus 6, and then it says 10 plus 6 is equals to 16. It's just a robot. So basically, that simple robot does not work on knowing the child or things like that. It is not complex. It does not have a lot of intelligence. Its work is basically to receive the input now. The input it receives at that moment, work on it, and perform an action that corresponds to that input. So basically, that is what a simple reflex agent is. It works on the current percept, and it has limited intelligence. We are also saying that it does not have knowledge of non-perceptual parts of the current state, meaning that it does not understand its environment fully. It only understands its inputs. All right, it does not understand its environments fully. So what this point means, for instance, um, a robot that cleans a surface, right? A janitor robot that cleans a surface, that robot does not know people. It does not have knowledge of people. It only has knowledge of the surface it works on. So when it is cleaning, it can as well hit you without knowledge. All right, it can as well hit you without knowledge. So when it is cleaning, probably it will have to it will have everybody else will have not to walk on that surface. All right, when it is cleaning, because it does not observe its environment fully. All right, it does not have knowledge of non-perceptual parts of the current state. It does not observe its environment fully. Also, it is not adaptive to changes in the environment because of what? Because it is limited. It has a limited intelligence, so it cannot adapt. It only does performs actions dependent on the inputs it receives. So this is the structure. Now, when you are asked the structure of agents, this is what you are supposed to draw. Okay, what we have here. This is the structure of a simple reflex agent. This is the structure of a simple reflex agent. All right, let me see. Okay. Now, this is the structure. So this is how we understand the structure. This is the environment. This here is the environment of the agent. Then This is the percept. It's not a precept, it's a percept. Sorry for this, sorry for that, for that spelling error. It's a percept. A percept is an input, right? And a percept is an input, so it receives, the agent receives a percept from its environment, and hence that's why the direction of the arrow as indicated, it receives a percept from the environment, and then it receives a percept through its sensors. So sensors are the parts that receive percepts. Then it sees what the world is like now, the current state. For instance, for a robotic janitor, the world, the state of the world is the cleanness of that of the room. All right. So what the world is like now. Why? Because it is supposed to act on the current percept. Okay. So it has to see what is the condition of the world or its environment now. All right. And then it determines what action it should do. And this action is based on on an if-else statement, a condition action rule. It can be an if-else, can be a while loop, whatever, a control structure. So this action here is based on a condition. So if it determines that the world now is floor is dirty, that is the state of the world or the state of the environment. Floor is dirty. Then it will perform an action through its actuators. All right, and that action will be corresponding to that particular input and the state of the world at that time, at that moment, and it will perform an action now to the environment, and that action will be to clean the room, because the world now, the environment now is dirt on the floor, so it will clean the room. So that's how simple reflex agents work. They just act on the current percept. So that is the structure. Okay, let's go to model-based reflex agent. Why are they called model-based? It is from the word model. Now, model here meaning that these agents have a knowledge of how things work in its environment, how things work or how things are optimally, prerequisite knowledge things work in that environment. So it is like an upscaled modification of simple reflex agents. Simple reflex agents do not have knowledge of how the environment normally is. Their work is just to receive input from the environment, determine from that input what action to perform. All right. But model-based agents, they are simple reflex agents that have a knowledge of how that environment works. Okay. So for instance, if it is a janitor, this janitor understands that there are normally people or students that pass through that veranda, or there are guests, there are people, there are human beings. Let's say human beings, because it categorizes everyone like human beings. It doesn't know students or teachers or guests. So if it is working here in CTEC or in an organization, it knows that in that veranda people normally pass through. So it knows how its environment works. It has a model of how that environment works. So it works, it does not only come up with actions based on a simple reflex action. Its action is not a simple reflex action. It is based on a model of how the environment works. For instance, if it is a robotic janitor, what will happen is that it will begin cleaning. We begin from the simple reflex. So what is the state of the world now? Floor is dirty. Let's say that is the state of the world now. What action to take? The action to take based on the condition or the if else, the while, do, or for loops, whatever it has been coded with, it has to know that from this input, it has to clean the floor. But it does not just clean the floor, it checks how that environment is, other factors of the environment, because it has a model of how that environment works. So it knows there are people passing, so it is able to navigate through cleaning as people pass. It is able to pause when people are passing. It is able to clean where people are not stepping and leave where people are stepping. It is able to do those things. It has a model of how that environment works because it knows this is a veranda and this is how people work in that environment. People normally pass through here. So it has that prerequisite knowledge. So model-based agents are simple reflex agents that have prerequisite knowledge. So they do not only work on a simple reflex, they they don't only perform a reflex action, but they also check how their actions are going to affect the model. Okay, the prerequisite knowledge of how the environment is. So let me go back here to the notes. All right. So the agent works on two things: a model and an internal state. A model is a knowledge of how things happen in the world. Okay, just as I've said, like a robotic janitor knows that people normally pass through the veranda. That's how things happen in this world, in its world. And then there is an internal state. An internal state is a representation of the current state based on percept history. So a model-based agent is a reflex agent that also considers its percept history. It does not ignore its percept history. So if it is a robotic janitor, it is able to know that during this time of the day, like 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., there is normally no people around that veranda. It has a knowledge, it has a history, the perceived history, okay, the input it receives from its environment. So it is able to know if it's a janitor or I'm sorry, I had gone off. My connection had gone wrong. Let me share this screen back here. All right. So here we are. So we were saying that it has a model and an internal state. A model is a knowledge of how things happen or how things normally are in the world or in the environment. World here refers to the environment. Okay. And then internal state is a representation of the current state based on the perceived history. All right. So how does it work? Updating the current state requires information about the model, how the world works, how the agent's actions affect the world. All right, those are two things that will determine what is the current state. All right, for instance, janitor. Let's go back to a robotic janitor. For a robotic janitor, the way it's going to be able to determine its state, its internal state, the internal state is the current based on the perceived history. In other words, it is this current state, hii internal state ndio yenye agent itatumia kuperform action. So in simple reflex agent, the state is based, let's go back here to simple reflex. The state of the world is just this, it's a simple state. Is the floor dirty or is it not, or is it clean? That is the state. But when you go to model-based agents, it is not just about dirty and clean. It is about dirty and how the environment is. For instance, the floor can be dirty, but there are people passing. So floor dirty, but people passing may not come up with the same action like reflex, floor is dirty. For reflex, simple reflex, floor is dirty, will come up with an action, clean the floor. But this one, floor is dirty, may not necessarily come up with an action, clean the floor. Why? Because that particular state is also affected by how the world is right now. For instance, there are people passing. So how can I clean when there are people passing? All right. And also how the agent's action affects the world. If I begin cleaning and people are passing, am I going to hit people? Yes. So it's going to do what? It's going to wait until there are probably 5 people, yeah, in the environment, in the veranda. Do you get it? So model-based agents, they don't perform action just on a state, but on an internal state. And that internal state is informed by, one, the current state, how the world is right now, and how the action will affect the environment. Okay, so put all those three together, then it will come up with a corresponding action. So you'll find that a model-based agent, a motor like a robotic janitor, will find that floor is clean, but floor is dirty, but it cannot clean because there are people passing. That is how the world is. All right, there are people passing, and also it cannot clean because there are people passing. If it cleans, it will hit people. All right, so it may wait until when the world evolves, and that's why we have the word evolve, until the world, the environment evolves. Evolving meaning it will change. So it can wait until there are 3 to 5 people per given minute, something like that, and then it can clean. Are you together? So that's how a model-based agent works, and I hope that you are understanding. All right, let's go back. Okay, all right, I was almost failing to show. So this is the structure. This is the structure of a model-based agent. Environment yake ndio hii, na hii ndio the internal state. All right, the agent itself, hii ndio robot yenyewe. So if we talk about a robotic janitor, it works in a veranda. So veranda ndio environment. It receives a percept. So this percept, as you can see, again there is an error here. It should be a percept, not a precept. A percept. All right. So it receives a percept like floor is dirty through its sensors. All right. It is able to sense the. By the way, let me ask you, what could be the sensors of a robotic janitor? A janitor that is about, a robot that is supposed to clean the floor. What is the sensor? Itatumia nini kujua kuna dirt on the floor? I want people to try. What will that agent use as sensors to know that there is dirt on the floor? How should an agent, should a robotic janitor know that there is dirt on the floor? What is the sensor? What is the sensor that is supposed to determine, to detect dirt or cleanliness? People, I need you to try. Kipkirui, Nderitu, Margaret. Dust particles are the dust particles iko kwa environment. Dust particles cannot be a sensor. Dust particles is part of the environment. It's not part of the agent. Infrared rays. Infrared rays. I was almost saying X-rays. But well, let's talk about rays. I think we are thinking in the same page. Yes, it will use either X-rays or infrared rays. Why? Because it is supposed to see unevenness on the floor. Unevenness on the floor. For instance, if it's an X-ray, it is able to know the leveling of the floor. All right, the regular leveling of the floor. It can determine how regular that flow is. Okay, it knows this is part of the flow. This is part of the flow. It's not that like X-ray. Just like X-rays, X-rays can determine this is your bones. Okay, it can see your bones. It can see your structure. So if it is an X-ray, it can see that this is a floor. This is a floor. Even if it's a tile, kuna tiles, itajua pia uko katikati ya tiles. Hiyo pia ni part of the floor because it determines the structure of the floor. But then if it sees anything uneven that is not part of the structure of the floor, then it will determine that is that. Okay, and then it will go and clean. So that is basically it. It will use X-rays, all right? X-rays. So that is how it will use X-rays as the sensors, all right? So let's go back here. So then it receives percepts through its X-ray sensors or its X-ray device. Photosensor with infrared, yes, that is also a possible scenario. Yeah, that is also a possible scenario, a photosensor with infrared. All right. So we go back here. So it receives percept that there is dirt on the floor. That is the percept. The percept is floor is dirty. All right. So the state of the world now is dirty floor. But what should I do is not just based on the current state. This particular state that I've highlighted here is not just the current state of flow is dirty. It is the state based on also other things like, first of all, the state itself, that flow is dirty, they are highlighted, and how the world evolves. In other words, how are people moving in and out of that veranda, or how are people moving in and away of that veranda? That is how the world evolves. And then what my actions do. My actions, when a floor is dirty, I normally clean. All right, so those are my actions. But it's a combination of all these factors. The state, if the state flow is dirty, how the world evolves, there are people, and then my simplest action is clean flow. So based on all these things, then this is what affects the internal state. So sasa hii hapa sasa ndio inaitwa internal state. All right, the internal state is dependent on the current state, okay, how the world evolves, and the simplest actions that it performs, all right, in that scenario. And the scenario is when the flow is dirty, the current state. So all these factors here now inform the internal state. So hii inaitwa internal state. Pale kwa simple reflex, hii ndio ilikuwa tu current state. Okay, flow is dirty, that was all. But for model based, it's now called the internal state, which is informed from the current state, how the world evolves, and the simplest action it does based on that state. Okay, so now flow is dirty and people are passing and I am supposed to clean. So what is the other action that now I should do based on that internal state? So based on the if-else statements or whatever the control structures it has been pre-coded with, it is supposed to know that if the current state is floor dirty and there are people moving, many people moving in and away of the veranda, and my simplest action is clean, then the final action is going to be do not clean, or clean the areas that don't have people passing. All right, because it has been informed by not just the current state but the current state and the info that there are people passing, and that the simplest action is clean. All right, so it's going to take this simplest action here, what my actions do in that state. All right, it's going to take that action, but modify the action because there is how the world evolves during that particular time. There are people passing in and away of that from that veranda. So the final action is going to be what? Clean those areas that don't have many people. All right. And then so if it comes up with that action, then it performs that action through actuators, and that action then affects its environment. It is able now to clean the floor. The floor becomes clean. So the actuators can be what? The actuators can be what for a robotic janitor? The actuators for cleaning can be what? The actuators for cleaning can be the actuators for cleaning, a locomotive system for moving. That is for movement. Locomotive system is for movement. I'm talking about for cleaning. A vacuum cleaner. Yes, that is true. A vacuum cleaner. So it can have an installed vacuum cleaner on it. So the robot, but imewekwa vacuum cleaner ndani. The normal vacuum cleaner. All right. The normal vacuum cleaner. All right. So it's just one robot. It's not a robot and a vacuum cleaner. It's a robot that has a vacuum cleaner. That vacuum cleaner is the actuator of that agent. Right. So that is true. Okay. Let us go to now goal-based agents. From the word goal. All right. A brush. Yes, that is true. If it's not a vacuum cleaner, it can be a brush or a kind of a broom or something. Those things. All right. Yeah, that is good. So goal-based agents, from the word goal, these are agents that perform actions that must meet a goal. There is always a preset goal, and all actions must lead up to meeting that goal. All right. So it does not just perform actions based on how the world is or based on how the input, the current state is, but also a preset goal. It is supposed to achieve a certain goal. So that goal is already pre-coded in its system, in its functionality. It is supposed to meet a goal. So that's why it's called a goal-based agent. So let's study this. The knowledge of the current state is not always sufficient to decide for an agent what to do. So what this statement just means is it does not just depend on its input. All right, because that input may not achieve its goal, and then the agent needs to know its goal, again, as I've said, it has to have a preset objective. So when it performs any action, the final action it will take, it is supposed to meet a certain objective. Then they have the ability of a model-based agent by having the goal information. All right, the goal information is basically things to do with how the world is, how the world evolves, and also the objective it is supposed to meet after an action, a final action. Then they choose an action so that they can achieve the goal. These agents may have to consider a long sequence of possible actions before deciding whether the goal is achieved or not. Such considerations of different scenarios are called searching and planning, which makes an agent proactive. Now, there is what we call search techniques, but search techniques tutazisoma tukifanya problem solving, which is chapter 3 immediately after this. So problem solving itakuwa problem solving, hapo ndio tutaona mambo ya searching, how an agent is able to dig down into possible actions and come up with one possible action. Now let's come back. Goal-based agents are basically agents that have an objective. They know what they are supposed to, they know what should happen after all the actions have been taken. They know what should happen. All right, so they are not just out to meet, they are not just out to perform an action because there is an input, but all the actions that the particular action that they take it should be informed from a goal, from an objective that they know about. All right, let's talk about again a robotic janitor. A robotic janitor is a robotic janitor here as a goal-based agent. It will have the characteristics and the capabilities of a simple reflex agent, meaning that it is able to know its current state, floor dirty or floor clean. But it also has the capabilities of a model-based agent, meaning that it is able to know how the world is and also how the world evolves. All right, like a model-based agent, like how many people pass through this veranda during a particular period of time during the day. So that is how the world evolves, how that environment changes, all right, from time to time. But then it does not just have those two, the ability to know the current state and the internal state, how the world evolves, but also it has an ability to know what should happen after all that, what should happen after a considered action is taken. What should happen? That is what is called a goal. For instance, a goal-based robotic janitor will not just be out to clean and make the floor clean. It will have a goal that every 10 minutes the floor should be clean. All right, every 10 minutes the floor should be clean. That is a goal, and that goal has already been preset. All right, so it is not just about itakuwa inaangalia during every 10 minutes ka kuna itakuwa inaangalia from the sensor itakuwa inaangalia kama kuna the floor is dirty or floor is clean. So itakuwa inaangalia tu just like a simple reflex agent. Every time pia itakuwa inaangalia like a model based agent if there are people that are passing, how the world evolves. Why? Because that is what informs its internal state. Okay, if there are people passing in the veranda, but whether there are people passing or not, or whether there is dirt or it is clean, it has to ensure that every 10 minutes, a particular section of that floor, or let's just say it's just a veranda, whole that veranda, particular section of that veranda is what? Is clean every 10 minutes. So hiyo iko na objective. Haitakuwa tu inaangalia kama ni dirty ama ni clean alafu inapanguza. No, itakuwa inahakikisha every 10 minutes the whole veranda is clean, and still it will not hit or hurt anybody that is passing through the veranda when it's doing that. All right, and it's also not going to leave any stain. All right, so ita ensure imemeet hizo objectives zote. One, however the world evolves, however many or few people are passing through that veranda, it still Sorry, I was off again. My connection is fluctuating, but I am on again. Let me share the screen so that we can continue. We have 5 minutes to the end of the class before the session ends. All right. So we were talking about goal-based. Okay. So robotic janitor that has a goal. There is a screen. A robotic agent that has a goal, it will have a goal like every 10 minutes the floor, the veranda should be clean. So that's a goal. But using its goal, it's going to use the capabilities of a model based. How? It's going to know how the world works or how the environment works, and also how that environment evolves, whether there are people or no people. And if it finds that there are stains on the floor or there is dirt on the floor, it's going to clean anyway, but it's still not going to hit people. Why? Because it has a goal to achieve, because iko within its 10 minutes framework or 10 minutes parameter. So lazima kwa hiyo 10 minutes parameter ifanye what it has to do to ensure that the floor is clean, whether there are people or whether there are no people, whether the world evolves or whether the world does not evolve, based on the percept floor dirty. Okay, so that's how goal-based agents work. So utapata that robotic agent, this is how it will work. It will go around the areas that people are not stepping on and clean, and come back to the areas that people have come out and go back to the area. So itakuwa inaenda in a way that it meanders through the veranda, cleaning in a quick sequence to ensure that that 10-minute within that 10-minute parameter the flow is clean. And it goes again, because it's like a loop, it goes again into another 10-minute parameter. It checks the internal state again and how the world is evolving, like a model based, and then meet that goal of ensuring that in that 10-minute parameter every place is clean, okay, without hitting somebody, and ensuring that no stain is left. Okay, so that is how goal-based agents, they have a goal they have to meet, and therefore they use the capabilities of a model-based and the capabilities of a simple reflex to achieve a goal. And that goal is preset. That goal is like a parameter that has been preset into its code. All right, so that is how goal-based agents work. And then okay, mtaangalia hii structure kwa nini kwa notes. Nita upload hii part ya notes. Alright, so it looks just like a model based. Ukiangalia hapa iko na nini, iko na what informs the internal state. So internal state ndio hii. Alright, internal state iko imeinformiwa by the goal. Okay, so this current state, flow dirty, how the world evolves, people are passing, what my action should do, I should clean. So what the world is like now. The ZDS platform is fluctuating. That's why you find that from my end I am losing my connectivity. It's not really the internet, it's the system itself. Let me go back here. We have 3 minutes to finish up. Well, you're going to see that structure, okay? So it is informed from the goals. As you can see in your notes there, it's informed from the goals. And then if the goal is 10-minute parameter flow should be clean, then what action should I take now? So action there are the possible actions that I should take. And as we have said here, as you can see back in these notes, it does what? It does a searching and planning. So iko na goal but kuna venye hii world iko. Alright? Kuna venye world iko na kuna venye state iko. But kuna goal lazima ikuwe met. Alright? So it has to search through its past history to determine how it used to perform given similar scenarios in its past, and also it has to plan its actions, how it's going to execute the actions to meet that goal. All right, it has to plan. So planning, it can be something like, okay, I'm going to start from point A, karibu na mlango nitaanza ku clean karibu na mlango juu hapo watu hawako. So nikianza hapo nitaenda nikimianda through the veranda. There are people passing in the left side of the veranda. So I'm going to go through the right side of the veranda first. As I clean there, people watakuwa wameisha. So I go back to the left side of the veranda and clean. People will begin stepping on the right side of the veranda, and then I go back there in a cyclic manner. So in other words, those actions have been planned so that it can achieve that goal, all right? And also to meet the state which is dirty, flow dirty, and also to accommodate the evolving world that there are people passing. So it's not going to go hitting or hurting people. Okay, so that's how goal-based agents work. Then next time we are going to look at utility-based agents and learning agents. I can see our time is over, and this session has been, I've set this session to close itself automatically when the time is out. So it should time out at 10:45. So we only have 1 minute. So if you have any question, please do ask, probably on WhatsApp in the group, or you can do a chat as you normally do in other units, and in other ways that you can ask a question. Ensure that you reach me so that I answer any question that you have. So in the next class, we are going to start from utility agents and the rest. So have a good day.